Hello and welcome to LFC Focus. It's a bit of a bumper news special this Friday evening, as I'm sure all of you are aware. Liverpool have been rather busy today in the transfer market. Of course, the massive news, and the news I'm going to start off with, is the confirmation that Thiago Alcantara is at last a Liverpool player. It's a saga that's gone on a little bit longer than most of Liverpool's recent transfer sagas. We've kind of settled into this rhythm now where, you know, interest in a player is announced, then an hour later we find out Liverpool have made a bid, half an hour later that bid's accepted, and another half an hour later they're in a top saying how much they love the club and how they used to play as Liverpool on the PlayStation back in the early noughties, and all that kind of usual nonsense that we've come to know and love. We had that with Fabinho. We also had it with Tsimikas earlier on in the window. That just came completely out of the blue after, I wouldn't call it a saga with Jamal Lewis, but it went on for maybe about a week or so whether or not Liverpool were interested in him. Whereas Thiago has obviously been pretty much common knowledge that we want him. He wants to come to Liverpool, and Bayern are probably going to let him go for at least a month now. You know, you look back to the Champions League final, that was, I think, 3 weeks ago as of this weekend, and we were all watching that game thinking this is probably his last game, and that seemed evident through the way he carried himself. Once he came off, he looked so desperate for Bayern to get over the line because, of course, he wanted to end on a high note after a fantastic 7 years there. But I think doubts started to be cast in everyone's minds. Liverpool sort of poured cold water on the rumours, as they normally do, and it became a question of whether or not we would have the funds, whether or not we'd have to sell to buy. As it stands, clearly Liverpool do have the money, although the deal is structured rather oddly. Of course, it's 25 million quid if all the add-ons come into play and everything, but it's an initial 20 million paid in £5 million instalments once a year over the course of his 4-year contract, and then that extra 5 million is should he win things like the Premier League and the Champions League and all the kind of things that Liverpool are pretty much guaranteed to win if you're on the optimistic side, as I often are in the next 4 years. I certainly think now we've got Thiago in the ranks as well, that boosts our chances of getting some major silverware in the coming years. But now that has all been sorted, he's now a Liverpool player. We've done quite well to get him on that kind of deal. Wage wise, I think he becomes our third highest earner, slotting in between Virgil van Dijk and Mohamed Salah. That's obviously that's not really how we normally do things. Normally a player comes in, they get quite a low deal somewhere below 100k, and then should they perform well, as they often tend to do, they will get an extension at some point, pretty much normally within the first year. We've seen that with players, I think, like Andrew Robertson, Mohamed Salah as well, who've had huge boosts to their salaries not long after signing. Same with Virgil van Dijk as well, as, you know, evidence that we do reward performance and stuff like that. Thiago has come in and been rewarded with a strong contract straight away. I think part of that is because he's a world-class player. He's 29 years old. It's not like we're signing him then we're going to develop him. We're signing someone who's pretty much the finished article. You know, I don't think Jurgen Klopp is looking at Thiago and thinking he's going to need much time to bed in or get up to speed with how good this Liverpool team is, as you had with maybe Andrew Robertson, or as we're maybe now having with someone like Kostas Tsimikas. He is going to come in, and he's the kind of player that you're expecting is going to elevate those around him instead, that everyone is going to try and raise their game to compete with Thiago. And of course he's going to have to get used to the system, but you'd imagine he'd do that quicker than most, partially because, you know, he's coming from Bayern Munich, a team who play quite similarly to Liverpool. We're not signing him from somewhere lower down the table where they're used to sitting back and playing on the break a little bit more. He knows how to break down, you know, low blocks and stuff like that. He knows how to play in high lines. He is very well suited to our play style, so it is of course no surprise that Jurgen Klopp has brought him in. But like I said, with the whole wage thing, I think it's also probably to do with the fact that he's coming in for a cheap fee. With only 1 year left on his Bayern Munich contract, you tend to see players getting put on high wages because of that, because the money that would have gone towards a transfer fee instead goes to them. And of course, having cleared some high earners like Adam Lallana and Nathaniel Klein off the wage bill, we have got a little bit more wiggle room to pay Thiago those kind of wages. So of course, it's fantastic to see him. We're all absolutely ecstatic to have Thiago in a Liverpool shirt. There's a lot of chat over whether he is Liverpool's most high-profile signing ever, and of course, without the big price tag that normally comes with world-class players coming in, it kind of, that's dampened it a little bit. But in terms of quality, and in terms of him being the finished article as well, this is not a diamond in the rough. This is not a Sadio Mane or a Mo Salah who's coming in with potential but a little bit of doubt around them, and then they just explode and turn into a world-class superstar at Liverpool. This is someone who's coming in with pedigree, who's coming in with an absolutely phenomenal trophy record. You look at what he's won at Bayern Munich, you know, the European Cup, I think 7 titles on the bounce. He's won every single year that he's been there. Something like 4 DFB Pokals as well. So he knows how to win trophies. He's played for a brilliant Bayern Munich side. They make the Champions League semis pretty much every single year. So he's been playing in massive European ties year in, year out as well. So he is about a level above, I think, from the player we normally target. And that's not necessarily because we haven't been able to attract this player. It's also partially because that maybe hasn't suited our model as much. But a lot of this is about just Jurgen Klopp has said, or at least hinted at the fact that we've been willing to break our model a little bit here and step slightly outside of the norm. Because when a player like Thiago becomes available, you don't turn it down. And of course, if he is available and he doesn't come to Liverpool, he's probably going to go to one of your rivals, and we've got to avoid him going to someone like Man City, because of course a big thing about when he signed for Bayern Munich was that Pep Guardiola went from Barca, where Thiago had been playing, to Bayern Munich and said, I want Thiago or nothing. That is a phrase that I think has been seen a lot on social media recently. And so Pep Guardiola clearly values him, and if he wasn't going to Liverpool, I'm sure he would have tried to swoop in and sign him up for Man City. So it is a huge, huge coup for Liverpool to actually get hold of Thiago Alcantara, and it's going to be interesting to see exactly how he fits into our system. Of course, normally when we sign these types of players, there's a bedding in process. You maybe don't see them as a fully fledged first teamer week in, week out, completely bedded into the system until about January time. But I think given how much rotation is going to be necessary, of course, with the restrained schedule and how good a player he is, I think we'll see him sooner rather than later. It has been confirmed that the paperwork was submitted before the deadline today, which means he can play in the game against Chelsea on Sunday. I don't think he will. Jurgen Klopp said that he'll be available and in the squad, so I'm sure he'll travel. I'm sure Jurgen will be trying to bed him into the team as quickly as possible. But given that I'm not even sure he's had much of a pre-season, of course, Bayern started later than Liverpool, having played in the European Cup final, and then with the latest start date for the Bundesliga, that's only just started tonight. So I think he's probably only had a week tops of training there. Whereas Liverpool have had a fair bit longer, at least a few weeks of training camp, a few more games and stuff like that as well. So to throw him in a game like Stamford Bridge away would be a little bit mad, but who knows, maybe he gets 15, pardon me, 20 minutes towards the end of the game. And then, of course, you have got that match against Lincoln on Thursday night, and I think he is a shoo-in to probably start that game. If we want to protect him and save him for the Arsenal match a week on from Monday, then maybe he gets only 45 minutes or half an hour or something like that. But I think it will be great to just get him in a Liverpool shirt, get him to make his debut, see as much of him as we possibly can, and see just how good this lad is. And also, tactically, I'm intrigued to see whether we shift our own plans a little bit, because as I said, he's a little bit different to what we normally have, although he does suit the Liverpool system. High lines, playing against low blocks a lot of the time. He's a fantastic presser of the ball as well. It's something that's been overlooked, obviously being a Spanish player and such a great passer. People tend to overlook the other sides of his game, and that includes interceptions, pressing, closing people down, tackling, closing spaces incredibly well as well, turning away from presses and turning, defence into attack within the blink of an eye. Those are all fantastic traits of his. So he should fit the system reasonably well, but I do wonder whether we maybe go to a 4-2-3-1. It's something we've experimented with already a little bit this season, but I wonder whether maybe playing in a 2 with someone like Henderson or Fabinho, or maybe even someone more advanced like Wijnaldum or even Keita, might suit him a little bit better than the whole conundrum then if you play the 3 of whether he plays in the 6 or whether he plays further forward. I personally think if you're playing against a bottom 10 team, he probably plays in the 6, because you want him deep lying, spraying balls, got a great view of the pitch, and he's more than good enough defensively to deal with counter-attacks. If it's a big European night or a game away to Man City or Chelsea or Man U or anything like that, I think he's more likely to play in the 8 with someone like Fabinho behind him and Henderson on the other side. I think if I were to choose a midfield for Man United away in May, obviously so many things could happen, but given how I think Thiago's going to bed in and looking ahead to those types of games towards the end of the season, if all players are on their usual game and on their usual form and they're fit and everything, I would say that the kind of midfield I'd want for that kind of match is Fabinho holding and Henderson providing a lot of the engine, a lot of the running, and then Thiago doing the same, but also bringing some wonderful passing range to that midfield. So I think he'll fit in absolutely fantastically. It has been brought up today, what if he does flop? What if it goes completely wrong? And that's not something that we can completely rule out. It is possible that this just doesn't go the way we want it to go. That can happen with transfers, but this is as much of a shoo-in for a guaranteed successful move for a player and for a club that I think you're ever going to see. So, of course, I'm absolutely over the moon that we've signed Thiago. I cannot wait to see him in a Liverpool shirt. He looks absolutely fantastic. He's got a banging song as well. I'm made up with how quickly we've sorted that one out, and it's such a shame that we're not going to be in the stands and out in pubs and concert venues and stuff like that, and we're going to be able to get that song going. But once COVID has gone away, or at least gone quiet as much as it possibly can, or we get a vaccine or something like that and we can all get back in the grounds, I'm sure it's going to absolutely go off with that fantastic Thiago song. If you haven't seen it already, look for it on social media. I'm sure you'll be able to find it. It's set to Cuba by the Gibson Brothers, if you're wondering the song, and it is an absolute belter. So next up, no sooner had the Thiago news broke that it came out that Liverpool were in serious talks to sign Diogo Jota from Wolves as a backup forward. It's come completely out of the blue, this one. This isn't like the Thiago deal where it's been quite a protracted saga, and we've known for a while about Liverpool's interest, and we've known for a while about Thiago's desire to come to Liverpool. This one has just come from absolutely nowhere. We did, of course, have a little bit of news about Ismaila Sarr over the last few days. Now Liverpool were looking at him. It's very clear that we are trying to find some kind of suitable backup for the front three, but the fee for Ismaila Sarr seemed to be proving a little bit of a stumbling block. Watford wanting at least 40 million quid for him, which is a fair amount of money for a player who'll be coming up from the Championship. You know, normally we like to do these deals with relegated clubs where we can get players on a cut price fee because they're unlikely to stay. They're normally trying to push through a move because they don't want to hang around, and also that club just needs a little bit of cash to tide them over now that they've been relegated. So I think Liverpool were probably hoping for somewhere more in the region of 25 or 30 million quid for Ismaila Sarr. Personally, I wasn't that wild about him anyway. I know he performed well against us in the league game and got the goals and caused us problems, but he didn't blow me away in the way that Sadio Mane has done against Liverpool in the past. There's obviously some similarities there with them both being Senegalese, with Mane being a kind of big brother figure to Ismaila Sarr, both on international duty and now that the young winger has arrived in England. But he just never seemed to set the Premier League alight in the same way that Mane could just suddenly switch on and own games and win matches all by himself. Ismaila Sarr was inconsistent in the same way for Watford, where he'd have good games and quiet games, but he never just exploded and ran the show in the way that Sadio Mane seemed capable of doing. And a player that does seem to have that quality, or at least in my opinion, I've seen it more from them, is Diogo Jota. I think between him and Ismaila Sarr, I'd much rather have Jota. Part of that is just because of how much I admire Wolves. I love their system. I think they're a fantastic team to watch. The way they play is great, and of course they take a lot of points off of their rivals with the way that they do so well against big sides. But the way they counter-attack, it's quick, it's incisive, they tend to finish well as well, and Diogo Jota has been a large part of that. Something that I didn't really notice but has started to come to light is his apparent inconsistency. Now, maybe I don't notice that because he tends to perform against the big teams and maybe goes a little bit quieter against the small teams. Sadio Mane was also guilty of that at Southampton before we signed him. But in between him and Sarr, he's played at a higher level at Wolves. Obviously, they are at the relatively top level of the Premier League, whereas Watford got relegated. Wolves have played European football, albeit in the Europa League, but you still play some decent sides in there. BT Sport, around the same time that the Jota rumours dropped, put out a video of an 11-minute hat-trick he got after coming on against Besiktas. Wolves were drawing 0-0 on the hour mark. They bring him on, and within 11 minutes they are 3-0 up, and it's all thanks to him. So he's clearly a very, very good impact player. He knows how to make a difference off the bench, which is going to be important. We're not looking for someone who's maybe going to run games for 90 minutes. We're looking for someone who we can throw on for 20 minutes and pretty much guarantee that they're going to make some kind of difference. We've relied on Origi for that kind of thing in the past, and sometimes it's worked, sometimes it hasn't. It's been a bit hit and miss. I think the problem there is we often relied on Origi for multiple things. We tried to make him a target man, but also he'd need to drop deep. Sometimes he'd need to go out wide, he'd need to dribble, he'd need to beat a man, he'd need to get to the byline and make crosses, and we were trying to do a one-size-fits-all approach with him. And I think if we get Jota in, then we can be a little bit more intelligent and tactical with how we make impact substitutions. We can assess the situation and look at it and think, does this situation warrant Divock Origi as a bit more of a target man? Does it warrant Diogo Jota as someone who's maybe going to get in behind a little bit more, going to counter-attack, going to play the ball a bit more? Or do we want Takumi Minamino, who's going to come deeper, who's going to demand the ball to feet and stuff like that, and then try and turn and dribble and make passes? We've got a few more options on our hands, and we've got more quality players on the bench who offer a variety of different things. And of course, Shaqiri will hopefully be alive this season because he just kind of disappeared off the face of the earth last year. It seemed it was just injury after injury after injury keeping him out. But back onto the topic of Jota. Like I said, I think he is a very, very good footballer. Something like 16 goals in 61 games for Wolves or something like that. Please don't credit me on that because that's kind of come from the recesses of my memory. I've seen a lot of Jota material today since the links first came out around the same time that Thiago was announced, because obviously everyone's just gone completely berserk. But in terms of the pure business side of things, apparently we've already agreed personal terms with him. We've talked to his agent, Jorge Mendes, the sort of Portuguese super agent. And that's all been agreed with a 5-year contract running until 2025. So we don't really have to worry about whether or not the player wants to come. It's now pretty much about whether we can get a deal agreed with Wolves. Apparently they are after £35 million or there or thereabouts, which is a little bit steep if you ask me personally, especially in these times. I'd rather see Liverpool pay something like 25 or 30 million for a backup forward. But you've got to take into account the fact that Wolves are a good side. He's proven in the Premier League in a way that, like I said, Ismaila Sarr kind of isn't. He's played in the Premier League, obviously, but I don't think he's proven that he can really, really mix it with the big boys. When I was looking at a Jota goals compilation, there were quite a few goals against Man U in there, which I really, really liked. I know Wolves and Man U seem to have this thing going on at the moment where they play each other every 3 weeks or something like that. So, of course, he's going to have a few goals against them, but he seems to turn up against them. And anyone who seems to know how to get past the David De Gea curse is absolutely fine by me. But, I think 35 million quid is probably a fair amount for him in today's market. Of course, with the COVID situation, I was maybe expecting it to be a bit lower, but it's certainly not an unreasonable price to be demanding. And while Liverpool themselves are apparently trying to pay something closer to 25 or 30 million, personally, I don't see why they'd want to haggle over that extra 5 million. I know the budget's very, very tight at the moment, but if you want the player and you've got the terms agreed, and Wolves seem to want to let him go as well, I don't really know quite what's going on there. If anyone knows what's happened with him and Wolves, then say it down in the comments below, because I've been looking and I can't find anything. But he just seems to have been frozen out, whether that's because he said, I've heard about interest from Liverpool, I want to go, and the manager said, okay, well, we don't want you playing then, which is an entirely reasonable thing to do. Then that might be why, but I don't really know. Let me know down in the comments below. If there's been a bust up or anything like that, I'd want to know about that, because obviously his character is very, very important. It's one of the reasons Klopp likes Thiago so much. It's one of the reasons Klopp has made all the signings he's made. He's, of course, got that famous phrase, I won't sign an arsehole just because he's good at football. So we want to be careful that he hasn't, like, forced to move out of Wolves, or he's just refused to train, or had a bust up with the manager or something like that. But everything looks like it's pretty rosy at the moment. Liverpool apparently want to get the deal done within the next 24 hours. As I said, personal terms already ironed out. It looks like he's going to have his medical very, very shortly, and it is just that fee that they need to agree over. And of course, this does raise the question with the whole COVID situation and how it's led to the line very much being from Liverpool that they have to sell to buy, that they're not going to be able to just conjure money up out of nowhere like, say, Chelsea have, where you look at Chelsea and Roman Abramovich can spend absolute loads of money because he kind of runs Chelsea at a loss, and you see a lot of clubs doing that. I'm pretty sure Man City are technically run at a loss as well. Liverpool can't do that. The FSG are built around running a football club as a proper business, a business that makes money and spends money and only spends what it can make. So from that perspective, I think we are going to see some outgoings between now and the end of the window. I don't think we're going to see them soon. I think Liverpool have actually been quite smart about this. They're doing the incomings now, where they can be a bit more careful about negotiations, where they've got time to do things like the Thiago package, where it's spread out over 4 years and you've got 5 million of add-ons and stuff like that. They're making sure they don't get forced into panicking. And then I reckon what we are going to do is when you get to that last week of the window, which I think is the first week of October, I'm pretty sure the 6th of October is the day it slams shut, as they always say. That's when we're going to start shifting reserves to teams who are panicking a little bit. I think certainly right now, players like Harry Wilson, Marco Grujic, Loris Karius, they don't seem that attractive. There's no one crying out to buy them or anything like that. But you get to a week from the window shutting, if a team wants a winger who's good on set pieces, and you say you can have Harry Wilson for 20, 25 million quid, I reckon they snap him up because he's now got that Premier League experience at Bournemouth. You look at Marco Grujic, who's had 2 good years at Hertha Berlin. Towards the end of the window, if someone wants a box-to-box midfielder who's strong and tough and likes to tackle, you can shift Grujic for 15 to 20 million. Likewise, Karius, you can just say, he's a goalkeeper. If you want one of those, 5 million and he's yours. Even players like Divock Origi, I'm not saying we should sell him, although the club may be looking at it now that they have bought in Diogo Jota. And Takumi Minamino seems to be stepping up in terms of how much Veroli's going to play in the first team. On deadline day, you could probably shift Origi for somewhere between 40 and 50 million quid. A bloke who's been playing for a high-profile Premier League club for years, has scored in Champions League semi-finals and finals. You can talk all day about his overall ability and his ability to do that kind of thing week in, week out. But when you've got that kind of pedigree, those kind of players, especially goal scorers like Divock Origi technically is, although he's not maybe not the most prolific, can go for ridiculous sums of money late on in the window. So I certainly think we are going to see more activity in terms of outgoings towards the end of the window as Liverpool look to recoup the fees that they have had to spend on both Thiago, Tsimikas, and hopefully, fingers crossed, Diogo Jota. And before I go, I'm aware this has gone on for a while and Diogo Jota and Thiago have been the main stories. It did also come out that Liverpool are interested in Ozan Kabak, the Schalke centre-half. It's a bit interesting, the centre-half situation at the moment. A lot of what's been said around Thiago has been around how it frees up Fabinho to maybe play a bit more often as a fourth-choice centre-half, because the issue Liverpool have at the moment is they've only got 3 senior centre-halves. Jurgen Klopp normally likes to have 4 in his squad, and of course you've got the issue that Joe Gomez and Joel Matip are a little bit injury-prone, I think it's fair to say. So there was a suggestion that Fabinho could play as an emergency centre-half, although then the problem that brings up with how that reduces your options in midfield. With Thiago now in the side, that is less of an issue, but it sounds like Liverpool are still sniffing around. Apparently Ozan Kabak is one of our #1 targets in that area. And the report has come from Manuel Veth, who is reasonably reliable. He hasn't said anything about fees being agreed or massive discussions, but it certainly sounds like Liverpool have got interest and maybe at least made an inquiry as to whether the player would be available. Normally, as soon as this kind of interest comes out, it's because Liverpool have basically got an agreement in principle with the player that you do want to join Liverpool. We don't tend to make bids until we know that a player wants to come to us and might not force the move, but will say to their parent club, if you could let me go, that would be sound. The one issue is that Schalke's sporting director has said already this window that Ozan Kabak is not for sale at any price. Now, you could say that's a negotiation tactic, but personally, I think in a transfer window when there's other players available, if someone says not available at any price, you do maybe start to think, oh, we'll shop around and see someone who's more available. We're not going to have an absolute nightmare trying to negotiate. There is, of course, several weeks left of the window, so there's plenty of time for things to change. So it's one to keep an eye on, but I certainly don't think it's concrete in the way that Diogo Jota looks pretty concrete. And if I had to put money down, I would say that within 24 hours of me recording this video, which is just coming up to 9 o'clock on Friday evening, we'll probably be seeing him in a Liverpool shirt, which would of course be a fantastic sight. But yeah, I'm pretty sure I've covered everything I need to cover in this video. Let me know in the comments down below what you think about the Thiago signing, whether you think Jota's going to happen and whether you think he is good enough for Liverpool, whether that is as backup or to play any kind of role in the front three, or potentially a 4-2-3-1 system, whether we see a little bit more of that this season. But apart from that, if you did enjoy the video, as always, you know what to do. Hit the like button down there, hit that subscribe button there if you're new around here. Check out some of the other videos that have been out on the channel recently. Don't forget to follow at LFC Focus TV on Twitter, and I will see you all very soon. Until then, bye for now.